My name is Scott Fogelman, and I am the Director of Business Development here at Up&Up.
And I'm Allison Lanier. I am the Business Development Manager with Up&Up.
I'm Mary Beth Oakey. I'm an account executive with Up&Up.
All right, so like I mentioned, like many of you may be working from home to do your part to slow the spread of coronavirus. So are we. So with that in mind, today we will excuse all dog barks, screaming children, cats running across keyboards, etc. So no worries about that. But on a more serious note, we do truly appreciate you all joining us today for what we know will be an informative conversation. We appreciate you taking the time out of your days and making the time to keep your businesses moving forward. So some of you have asked if we've seen changes to higher ed marketing plans, and as a whole, we can say right now that it has been kind of a mixed bag. We've seen communications to students, faculty, and staff be the number one focus. We've seen many presidents directly respond to their campus and communities with words of support and hope and encouragement. They've been offering guidance on how decisions are being made, talking about plans for what commencement will look like, what moving online is going to look like, and really just referring to their visions, their missions, and the promises that they've made to their students. So although this webinar was planned far before any of the current health crisis became a reality for us, it is timely because what we have truly seen is how a strong brand platform has really helped create that consistency in messaging, and how all of the messaging that we're seeing put out from crisis communications, presidents, faculty addresses as well, is staying on brand, and it's really bringing these communities together in a time of need. So in terms of actual campaigns, what we've seen is that the majority of large initiatives have continued moving forward as scheduled. So that includes a lot of brand initiatives, web redesign projects, enrollment initiatives. But we have seen some teams that have had to kind of pause and shift to focus on outreach and student communications. A lot of the smaller organizations just really have to kind of put that effort first. So we've seen a little bit of both. But the main thing that we'd really like to communicate to you all through what feels like an extremely uncertain time is that we're all in this together, and Up&Up is here to support you however we can. So one thing we do want to make sure that we're keeping at the forefront of our minds is that we do need to stay focused on continuing to prepare for the impact of the 2025 cliff. Now is actually a good opportunity in our minds to start challenging higher ed, to innovate, to get creative, and to continue to be a positive force for good in the world. After all, it's going to be research that will solve the current health crisis, and the answer may very well come from one of your institutions, but regardless, it's going to be education that is going to solve this issue that we're all dealing with. One thing we wanted to mention too, several resources that exist for you to stay up to date include Inside Higher Ed. There is fantastic content being distributed by them on a daily basis. Our whole team is reading that, and we subscribe to their daily newsletters. We encourage you to do the same. Our friends at Campus Sonar, they're actually doing a great job of pulling together a lot of the conversations that are happening in Twitter land and elsewhere through social, and giving some summaries. So that has been a great source of information for our team. You all may benefit from that as well. Also the AMA. They've been putting out some really great content, and again, offering tools, tips, and different ways that we can all be successful in this time of transition. So to quickly shift back to the content for today, I'd like to go ahead and give you a little bit of insight into what we're going to cover. So we've already done our welcome. But what we were going to cover first are going to be the 5 trends that our agency is really focusing on in 2020 as a whole. From those trends, we're going to then define what is brand and what are the components that are used to build it. Following that, we're going to move into the 7 steps that you should follow when working on brand for your institutions. Excuse me. With a case study after that to really highlight the successes that can come from having a really well executed and thought out brand. Allison will share some insights of that. And then we're going to wrap up with a few words just about Up&Up, and then we'd love to open the floor for questions, discussion around the current environment, or any other topics you all would like to review. So one quick note of housekeeping. Mary Beth is going to be our moderator today. And so if you all notice, you'll have a chat window. please feel free to use that chat throughout the presentation. Drop any questions you may have. What we'll do, we're not going to stop throughout the presentation to answer those, but we will address them at the end. And if we do run out of time, we'll make sure that we address those in an email. And don't worry, if you don't want to share any of your questions publicly, you can address those directly to Mary Beth, or you can select to remain anonymous. So no worries about feeling embarrassed by your questions. Every question is going to be a great question, and we want to hear them. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with what you guys actually came to hear from us today. So the 5 trends that we are really focusing on in higher ed marketing this year start with brand. So that's why this is webinar number 1 of a series of several. And brand is really going to be, this is your secret sauce. This is going to be where you are able to highlight your differentiating points. Your greatest assets are going to be talking about what you offer and how you can attract more of the right students. So we're going to go through what is going to be critical in creating these brand elements, how you're going to be successful, and how to plan for that. Another topic that we're going to really focus on this year is going to be around how do we prepare for that coming cliff? And we feel as though the best way to do this is going to be through a 3-year plan to really get ahead of what we all know is going to be coming, but to provide you with the most success. And what this really looks like is a plan that focuses first on research. Understand your current position, where you are today. How does that ladder into your strategic goals of where you would like to be? How do you then incorporate that into your brand strategy? And then other major initiatives such as website development, because we really refer to your website as a container for your brand, followed by digital marketing. How are you going to drive the awareness that's needed? How are you going to focus on those enrollment campaigns? And then the 4th piece here, well, actually the 5th, is going to be around student success. How are we tying all of this in with our tech stack to make sure that our efforts are really reaching the students that we need to, that we're measuring retention, that we're measuring success and the outcomes. So these are going to be how we perceive your plan should move forward to make sure that when 2025 comes, you're ahead of the curve, you're ready for the cliff, and it's just another day. The 3rd topic that we're going to focus on this year is that content is still very much king. It drives home your brand messaging. It highlights your unique value and showcases the benefits of your institution. Number 4, we internally at Up&Up have a philosophy that paid search should be a focus. It should be a focus before display. We want to ensure that we are capturing intent and not just interest. And we really want to push for efficiencies on budgets in all of your work. So being able to look at these conversion rates, we understand that, hey, we're able to do a lot with display, but we can do even more with search. And when we're using search to really highlight enrollment efforts, this is where you're going to get a great conversion. This is where you're going to get maximum return on your investments. So we'll be talking further about that throughout the year in ways that you can incorporate search into your strategies a little bit further. And then last, but clearly not least, and you saw on that timeline earlier, that we also need to address plans for life after the lead. It's one thing to get those right fit students. It's one thing to attract them to you, but it's another thing to make sure that you're nurturing them, making sure that you're attributing metrics to the campaigns that you have running, making sure that you're able to tell a story of ROI to your administration and really fall back to data to tell that story. So we're going to be highlighting all of these 5 topics throughout the year, but to get us started, Allison is going to really introduce us now to what is a brand.
Yes. So in order to create a successful brand, we must first answer the question, what is a brand? A brand is more than just your company name or logo. And as Scott mentioned earlier, it is really like your soul or your essence quality, if you will. And it goes deep into your messaging, visual identity, and your promise to those who interact with you. But more importantly, a brand is really that reason to choose. So your consumers, your prospective students, parents, and current students, faculty and staff, and really anyone who interacts with your institution are choosing you because of how you message the benefits of what you can provide them. It may also be the heritage that your institution has and the reputation that has been built over many years. So the most important thing to know is that today's students don't just buy a brand, they really buy into it. Brand campaigns encompass the entire experience a person has with your institution. So, how do you go about defining your brand and giving people a reason to choose you? We have identified 4 key pieces of the puzzle that are essential to cover during your brand strategy review. The first is your brand platform contents. This consists of your pillars, and those are the 4 sub-messages that set you apart from the crowd. Your brand promise, which I'm going to go into that in more detail in just a moment, but this is a value or experience that your stakeholders can expect to receive every single time they interact with your institution. The more you can deliver on that promise, the stronger the brand value in the mind of your students, faculty, and staff. And then a value proposition is a statement that answers the why someone should do business with you. It should convince a prospective student why your institution will be of more value to them than similar offerings from your competition. And then your beliefs or your proof points are really the evidence that that what you say you offer is true. And finally, your brand's personality or voice and tone embodies and expresses your values. So your voice, much like your personality, should really never change, but your tone can change based on the situation. All right, so next is your brand promise. I know I touched on this briefly just a second ago, but it's important to note a few things about your brand promise. So what it is, it's your commitment to experience and value. It may or may not be public facing. It can be launched as a campaign and really should not change regularly. We always like to provide some pretty well-known examples of brand promises so you can understand what a brand promise, is not necessarily your tagline, but it could be if it takes that shape. So the first example we like to show is BMW. So the ultimate driving machine. That's their outward and internal messaging. And many of you may be familiar with that. Next, you have McDonald's. So inexpensive, familiar, and consistent meal delivered in a clean environment. Although this isn't plastered on their walls or commercials, McDonald's stays true to this brand promise. You can see how this plays out when you're on a road trip and need to swing in to pick up your favorite meal. You know that what you're going to get, it should be the same thing that you got at your home McDonald's. And then for Nike, their outward-facing tagline that everyone's familiar with is "Just do it." But their brand promise is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And this is really evident in how they run their business. And then for Apple, Think Different or is all around offering technology that enables your consumers to live differently and consume differently. And that really does play into that brand promise to think different. Alrighty, so that moves us into your brand identity. And your brand identity is the visible elements of your brand. It's such as color, design, and logo that identify and distinguish the brand in your consumers' minds. Again, this is going to include your visual look and feel, fonts, color palettes, logos, word marks, and even your campaign concepts. Now, an aspect of the brand that is often overlooked or not held to a super high standard would be your brand assets. We cannot stress enough how important this piece plays a role in your brand strategy success. And what I mean by that are going to be items such as your photography, video, copywriting, and campaign execution. These may be your large ticket items, but there are ways to get creative and have it done right. You can utilize the strengths of your team, students, and if you are working with an agency partner, make sure that they can offer these capabilities so you aren't searching to fill the gap. I will now hand it over to Scott so he can dive into the 7 steps that will help you create your successful brand.
All right. Drum roll. So the 7 steps, but before we get into those 7 steps, we just wanted to address too that as marketers, the question we have to answer is, why will they choose us? As Allison mentioned earlier, it's all about choice and helping them identify with what is going to be the right choice. So our job is to highlight what makes us unique, tell our story, highlight the value that we bring, and find the offering that is going to be right for the student out there that's looking for it. One example that we love to give is one of our clients, McPherson College out in Kansas. They came with a problem of, oh, but we're in the middle of nowhere. that actually became a pivotal portion of their brand, where we're the middle of everywhere, because there are students out there who are looking for an experience that is rural, that where the experience is the campus, the college itself. So although some of these attributes may seem as a negative, or, oh, we don't want to own that, it can actually be some of those small things that end up truly being the reason why they're going to choose us. So ahead of those 7 steps that we know are going to make an impactful and successful brand, there are 5 attributes that we want to make sure that throughout all of our work is always top of mind. The first is that we have to be uniquely you and authentically you. We cannot tell a story of something that you're not. We can't catfish students, if any of you are familiar with that reference. We can't tell them one thing in all of our materials, and then, on their tours and everything that we're offering, and then bait and switch them when they get to campus. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is not the experience that I was promised. That's going to, really hurt your retention. It's going to hurt your word of mouth reputation. And it's just not a good experience for anyone. So be authentic to who you are and be unique. Call out those unique advantages. And we'll talk through how we'll do that in a minute. Be radically relevant too. You've got to understand who is your audience. What are their desires? What are their pain points and frustrations? What do they need to know? What information can we offer them to help make this huge life decision a little bit easier and a little less complex? We've got to be consistent. Allison mentioned about establishing that voice and tone. This is really where it comes to light, is going to be across your messaging, being consistent across all your media, all moments in time. We referenced earlier that some of the crisis communication that we're seeing today is really falling back on the brand platforms that many institutions have. They're talking about their vision, their missions, the way that they're there to support their students, and they're doing it in a way that is authentic to who they are. But again, it's consistent, and they're experiencing the same messaging in times of crisis as they would be in times of celebration and when things are flourishing. We also have got to be frequent. We have got to be fanatically frequent. Allison's going to kill me when I say this, but we often say internally that you've got to hear something 7 times before it really sticks and before you're like, oh yeah, I get it. So you've got to hear things 7 times before it sticks. So again, be fanatically frequent. Let them hear it, read it, feel it, live it, and let them do it over and over again. So then they become a part of that brand. The brand that you were highlighting to them becomes who they really are and who they want to be. And as an institution, that's what we can do with frequency, with consistency, and being relevant to them. And then lastly, we mentioned one of our key themes this year is content, and that content is still king. Content is king, and yet it can also be one of the scariest things that we as marketers deal with on a daily basis. So when we can start telling the stories of who we truly are, the outcomes that our offerings provide, the success stories, really focusing on what an education does and what our unique qualities provide these students who are the right fit for our institutions, those become sustainable stories. That's timeless. So if we think about these larger pieces in our brand messaging, you can think about divisible content as well. It's going to make your lives easier, but it's also going to really resonate with those audiences that you're trying to reach. So the big thing that you guys came here for today were, okay, the 7 steps. What is it going to take to be successful in our branding efforts? This is a process that Up&Up utilizes internally, but we feel as though if you all utilize it with your work as well, you'll be successful. And so those 7 steps start with insights. We then move into strategy. From there, we provide concepts and we build concepts. Once concepts are approved and tested, we move into production. But then before we really go and launch and activate this, we want to equip everyone. We want to empower our teams to understand who we are, how to message it, and how to remain on brand. When we go in market, we activate this messaging and we get out there. We then want to have the ability to measure it. We're all tasked every day with return on investment, what is success, what is working, what is not. So these are combined going to be the 7 critical steps to make sure you're successful. So with insights is first where you dig. You want to understand what is out there, what is being said about us today. Then you want to listen. You want to ask the questions that not really one is always comfortable asking. You want to hear the good, but you also want to hear the bad. You want to know the experiences in between. You really want to listen to see what is happening on your campus, what is happening in your community, and then you're going to probe further. Because again, we've got to ask those questions that no one will think to ask. What we're going to want to do here as well is make sure that we're doing this to a pretty large group. So we'll talk about this in a moment when we talk about measurement, but stakeholder alignment here is going to be key. We know that there are multiple stakeholders across your campus that brand is going to have an impact for. We want to hear from all of them. We want to know what it means to your prospective students and their families. We want to know what it means for your current students, your alumni, your faculty and staff, your administration. So bringing all those voices together, again, is how we're going to understand what is consistent among this group, what's an outlier, and what do we really need to highlight and own. Because when we're talking about branding, we're not creating a brand. We're not building something that doesn't exist. We're highlighting the points of differentiation that make us who we are. In doing this work, we're able to just really uncover that. So once you uncover those stories across your campus and the feeling of sentiment, what are the points that are making people most proud? That's where you can then compare to your competitors. Take a look at what they're messaging. Are you saying the same things? Because if you are, what's making you differentiated from that? Maybe you are student focused and your experience first, but if all three of your main competitors are the same, that's not differentiating you. So understand what they're doing. Do a marketing analysis. Look at their social, look at their enrollment messaging, look at what they're saying, and then compare it to your own. And then on the inverse of that external review, look internally. And again, we talked about being consistent and frequent. Are you being consistent in your messaging? Is the messaging that you're delivering a prospective student similar or the same to what you're delivering to a faculty member? Are you offering the same? Are you promising the same experiences? If not, that's going to be something that we want to make sure we address and improve, because consistency is going to be key. And then if we do find that we need additional research, now is going to be the time to do it. So take those findings, understand where your gaps exist, understand where you still have questions, and fill the void, whether it be with qualitative research, or you may need to even look at a third party and do some quantitative research. So at the end of that, you're going to be able to create a culminating document, your key findings. What have we discovered? What have we uncovered as our greatest strengths, our opportunities? What are our potential weaknesses? And what are potential threats to, our brand and our identity as a whole? This is where you're going to put it together and come up with your strategy. Strategies are going to be where we are really focusing on building that awareness. And again, at the end of the day, the majority of our work is geared towards enrollment and making sure that we're boosting applications, we are getting more the right students. We want to retain them. So again, being authentic is so critical here, because if we bait and switch these students, they're going to leave. They're going to call our bluff. So make sure that all of this is in line and true to who you truly are. And then beyond that, we'll see the benefits reaped from that. When we successfully retain students and we grow them and we make them proud of their education, they become the alumni that are engaged. They promote you. They talk about you. They encourage other students to have the same experiences that they've had, and they're going to give. And it's not just dollars that they're going to give. They're going to give their time, their talents, their treasures, employment opportunities, internships. The list goes on and on and on. So it's perfect to nail the strategy now. Make sure, again, that you're reviewing this with your teams and external audiences and get it right. Take the time to really focus on insights and strategy. Don't rush it. And the real culminating point here is when now you want to take your findings, take your strategy, understand how it's impacting your strategic plan as a school, a college, a program, university as a whole, and weave it together with those points that you've now created through that platform. This is where you're going to create the visual and the messaging together. And then you're going to test it. You want to make sure, okay, is this really what people are resonating with? Does it make sense? Does it give that moment of where you present to your board or your trustees and they say, yes, this is us. We get it. We feel it. We see it. Because again, with brand, It's a point of connection. It's an emotional connection, and that's what we're aiming for. So when you get into the concepts, you're going to start seeing it come to life. And again, we really challenge you all to have multiple options here, test them, see what resonates the best, and then move into the production phase. So within production, we like to say it's more cocktail than formula. It takes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, shake it, stir it, however you like it. And every project, every market, every medium is going to be different. But when we do it consistently across the board, again, we're going to have a message that's going to resonate with all of our intended audiences. So within the production phase, this is where you're going to start looking at, okay, how do I roll this brand out? What do I need to address first? What material exists that we can let it roll? What materials do I need to go ahead and redo? So do we need to look at collateral? Do we need a website redesign? Likely, because as we mentioned, your website is a container for your brand and often the front door of your institution. Experiential production, your on-campus feel too. That's going to be your signage, your wraps, your graphics, your wayfinding, everything. And then two really critical points there to support those are going to be photography and video. We know that consumers are watching more and more video today, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha that is going to be coming up. They are digital natives. They are video first. We've got to make sure that our brands are evolving to, again, meet all of these audiences where they have. And if we have strong visuals, strong messaging, that's how we're going to do it. So before we go into market, one thing that we really, really, really want to encourage here is training. Because training is going to empower everyone across your campus to live and breathe this brand all day long. They're going to understand the importance of consistency, the importance of that tone and voice, how to remain on brand at all times. As marketers, it's going to make your jobs easier so you don't feel as though you have to be the brand police. You're able to highlight the great work that the team is doing. And again, it just gets everyone on the same page. They feel as though their thumbprint was listened to because, again, we've brought back those stakeholder groups from when we were doing intake. We've got them around that same table and they're like, oh yeah, I had a part of this. I see this. I'm behind this and I'm going to do everything I can to support it and make it successful. So training is going to be key. And here at Up&Up, we call it Up Camp. But regardless of how you want to refer to your training, we think it is a very valuable point and you must do it before you really go into market. And so what we're calling going into market is activate. This is when all of that hard work, the months and months and months of work is going to get in market. And it's going to take shape through many fashions, many forms. This could be your traditional media, out of home, paid, social, earned. But not only is it going to be a singular campaign, you could have an awareness campaign. Hey, you've got to let everyone know this is our updated brand. That's your alumni. That's your current students. That's your prospective students and their families. But you also need to encourage that through your enrollment efforts. How is this new brand and this messaging, this voice going to encourage that new round of students? So don't look at it as a singular launch point. Look at it as a multifaceted campaign. One for awareness, one for enrollment, even one for your donors and other audiences, as well as community impact. So think of these as multiple places to start multiple campaigns. And when you're launching these campaigns, again, we have always got to go back to measurement. If we don't have goals in mind at the upfront of this, we are not going to be successful. So going back to that original step number one, insights and discovery. Make sure you are well aware of the goals of each stakeholder and all individuals involved in this. We need to understand, okay, hey, admissions staff, where do we need to go in the next 5 years? How can we help you get there? Faculty, what is it about your offerings that we need to highlight? And then how are we tracking that? So making sure that we have conversion goals, that we have engagement goals, that we have the reports and the dashboards to highlight that data. It's one thing to tell a story and give ideas of, hell yeah, it's doing great. I heard this comment. I saw this. I saw that. That's wonderful. But we all know that stories tell and data is really what's going to be able to sell the success. So make sure you have reports and dashboards that are able to support that. Use business intelligence to make decisions across your campus. Use this measurement to inform where you're going to go next. And we really encourage you to have quarterly performance reviews. Bring those stakeholders back, keep them in the loop, and that's going to help you in the long term remain successful with brand. So one other thing to cover real quick, and then we're going to transition over to a success story, is timeline. This is not something that's done in a month. This is not something that's done in 3 months, but really think about brand being an effort that could last 12 months plus. Typically what we've seen is that we need to take a solid 1 to 2 months for those insights and discovery. Give yourself time to come up with a well-thought, well-planned strategy. When you go into concepts, again, we don't only have to take the time to create and build the creative assets. We want to measure it. We want to test it. We want to look and see what we can do to augment it before we truly produce it in the final round. And then equipping. Again, take the time to train. It's going to be key. And then once you go into market, launch your various campaigns, whether you do them all at once, whether you do it on a rolling calendar. Always have a plan to measure and have specific goals for each of those. So Allison, if you could transition over to our case study, show what success really looks like.
So personally, I'm a visual learner, and if you're anything like me, it is easier for you to grasp all of these concepts that we have covered by seeing what it looks like in real life. So we're going to go ahead and highlight for you Marian University. So Marian University is a private Catholic university in Indianapolis. They set a strategic goal of doubling their number of graduates by 2025, which was a 9-year period at the project's inception. They partnered with us, Up&Up, to go through a brand platform launch that would help them differentiate and stand out while staying true to their traditional values. So before we look at where Marian is today, it is important to understand where they started. Their original messaging was designed heavily around the idea of developing leaders. However, as we began the research phase, we quickly realized that this messaging did not actually resonate with students and faculty as they originally thought. For Marian, we conducted in-depth research with our partner Sparks Research. We recognize that this may not be a financial or timely task that everyone can take on, but want to let you know that there are several ways you can gather this information, such as focus groups and surveys. So what we wanted to find out was, what did key stakeholders actually value about Marian? Some key themes came to light, which you can see in the upper right-hand quadrant, such as quality of faculty, welcoming campus, free expression, and good jobs after graduation. What you will also notice are the things that had a strong connection to Marian, but held a low market value, such as prepped for leadership. So this proved the point that developing leaders really wasn't the messaging and stakeholders resonated with. And out of the insight phase, we moved into the strategy phase, where Marian's positioning statement and pillars began to take shape. So to recap, your brand pillars are the points that set you apart from your competitors. And it is important to note that a single pillar may not be the differentiator that you need, but your pillars combined are what can really set you apart. So for Marian, their pillars are values, their personal development, and service. So a brand story is a cohesive narrative that encompasses the facts and feelings that are created by your brand. Unlike traditional advertising, which is about showing and telling about your brand, a story must inspire an emotional reaction. This can be either internal or external. We have seen many times where the brand story can be used in video production or other outlets. And the main point of the brand story is to truly evoke that emotion that says, yes, this is us. As I mentioned before, your brand promise is a value or experience that stakeholders can expect to receive every single time they interact with your institution. The brand promise can serve as your internal facing messaging or can come to life as your tagline, if you will. For Marian, their brand promise, which is find out what you're really made of, did in fact become both. So what are you made of became a thoughtful question and conversation starter that college-bound and current students ask themselves, drawing in on the values and leadership focus at Marian. Faculty and staff also challenge their students to find the answer. It's a tagline of sorts, but it informs every piece of execution. Something that was very important to Marion and a piece that Scott mentioned earlier is the importance of equipping your team for success in executing the brand. The "what are you made of" took shape in the brand guidelines for Marion as "what this brand is made of." This guidebook acted as the foundation for how various stakeholders of the institution could own the brand, speak to it, and help be advocates for bringing it to life. We cannot stress enough the importance of this piece. And then, using the strategy and insights work to inform each creative piece, we developed the new look and feel for the Marion brand. We created production-ready templates for the view book and other print collateral material, along with the high-level messaging. We also made 4 view book covers and themes to appeal to various types of prospective students. This was a great touch to add some personalization when students stepped on campus for tours and whatnot. We also created banners and other signage on campus that reminded Marion students and visitors to find the strength within themselves. And then we created a multi-channel content strategy to share the new messaging and stories throughout the website, email, and social media. This helps drive students to Marion at various points in the funnel. And at the top of the funnel, a brand video, out-of-home advertisements, and digital display ads were placed in targeted markets to build overall awareness and boost interest. An organic search strategy targeted students searching for particular academic programs, while email and social media were used to push out stories and information aimed at increasing yield. A microsite was built to accompany the view book and serves as the main landing page for paid media. I want to go ahead and note here that every budget may not allow for you to go from brand strategy directly into website redesign, but it is important to create a cohesive user experience for anyone interacting with your brand. And what I mean by this is that when someone sees an ad and then they click on that ad and it leads them to a website full of the old branding, this could really cause some confusion and cause them to jump off. So building a microsite to guide those users is really a great and creative alternative and budget friendly. We continue to partner with Marion on a monthly and project basis for a variety of needs. And some major projects included their University Capital campaign, which was Forging Leaders, the legacy we're made for. We also completed a landing page and print mailer to raise awareness and increase donations. It is important to think of all of the ways that your new brand can come to life, and don't just stop at the essentials of what you think you need. As we mentioned before, it's all about the results. So we're not just doing things just to do them and throw some money out there. So some key results for Marion included a 12% increase in applications over last year, a 12% increase in deposits over last year, a 50% lift in early orientation or registration sessions. And thanks to those efforts, Marion enrolled the largest first-time, full-time freshman class in school history in 2018. This is the part that I want to stress the importance of setting measurable goals at the beginning of any project that you're undertaking to make sure that your efforts are aligned to meet or exceed those goals. And Scott just emphasized that. Don't just kind of do something to do something. Make sure that you have something that can support those goals. Now, let's answer the question, what does a brand actually do for you? So a brand is going to allow you to attract more of the right fit students. It helps you reach your enrollment goals, which is a huge focus for most, if not all, institutions at this time. If you're representing yourself in an authentic way, your brand can also help with your retention rates, because more of the right fit students that know what they are getting into before enrolling have a higher chance of staying with you for the long haul. More so, it can help increase engagement on campus, not only for students, but for faculty and staff as well. And don't forget about your alumni and the pride that they get from seeing their institution thrive. This can also play into them donating their time, treasures, and talents as well, which Scott mentioned earlier. But finally, don't forget the donors. Having a compelling story to tell will help your advancement team when they are out there in the field speaking with potential donors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Allison. So to give you guys just a little bit about us and the whole purpose of Up&Up to be in higher ed and to exist as a whole is to uplift the brands that uplift others. We mentioned earlier, but It's going to be the research that's coming from education that is going to solve this health crisis that we're in today. The power of student success is extremely strong, and it's that purpose and it's that passion that drives our team. So you know a little bit about us just from what you've seen, but we're fairly small, but we like to say that we are nimble. We are versatile, and we partner. We partner because nothing good comes from just doing work close to our chest. Throughout everything that we do, our efforts across the board are to uplift your teams and get you to a better position for being self-sustaining and successful in the long term. Again, we've got a goal to make sure that by 2025, everyone out there is prepared for the coming cliff and that you guys are ready for more success than ever before. So just a little bit about us too. We don't only work with higher ed. We are mainly focused on higher ed, but we like to keep our pencils sharp as well. So throughout our work in higher ed, we do sprinkle in some consumer work because we want to make sure that our ears are staying close to the ground on what's happening in the consumer market so that we can also bring those advances to you. So across our client, this is just a small list. Some of you may see yourself up here, but know that it's not only at a university level. Brands transcend from what is done at a university or college level down into schools and colleges, as well as individual programs. So when you're thinking about brand, some of you may not be at a university level. Some of you may be at a college level or even at a program level. Brand matters everywhere. So always have reference to your umbrella brand, but understand how you can iterate on it, how you can make it your own, and how you can bring it to life through your program messaging, through your college messaging, and beyond. Outside of brand, we focus on other things. You saw our 5 trends for this year that we'll be talking about further, but we can help support your needs in other ways as well. So Mary Beth is going to be your go-to for existing accounts, and Allison and I for any prospective accounts. So let us know how we can help you, but know that we are here to help you full service and to meet your needs at any point in time. One way that we are going to help meet your needs, unfortunately, you'll see a strike through on this slide. We're going to be hosting our own conference, and we're calling it Up&Up. So we focused earlier on how important equipping is to our team and how important we feel it is for branding. Well, we think it's important just as a whole. So what our team is going to be doing, date TBD, it's kind of up in the air, and we might end up doing it virtually, but we're going to do a full day where we are going to uplift higher education. We are going to offer keynotes that bring in subject matter experts, both from inside the industry as well as from out, because again, we feel like it's important to understand consumer trends, consumer habits, and how we can apply that to higher ed. What can we do to push the needle a little further? We're going to do workshops. So it's one thing for you guys to sit in a webinar like this and just hear people like me drone on and talk. It's another thing to put you at a table with your peers, to challenge you to think, to give you a little bit of work assignment, and then present it back to the group. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to wrap up the day with some fun entertainment. So previously we had selected to host an event at the Greenville Drive, which is our local baseball team. Might still happen, may not, but stay tuned. More information to come on this. We would love for you all to participate. What great way to stay in touch with us, though, while things are still up in the air, is going to be either send us an email. You can always shoot us a note at hello@. You can also subscribe for our monthly newsletter. It's called Educated Marketing, and in there we focus content that is going to help you do your job better and give you resources and tips and tools to make your day just a little less stressful. Another great resource that we want to make sure you all are aware of, Allison and I weekly host a podcast called Undeclared, where we actually bring in guests from all across the board. We bring in higher ed guests, we bring guests from other industries like hospitality. We want to make sure that you guys have a place to hear the challenges that you're all facing, some tips and tricks to overcome any obstacles, and hopefully at the end of the day, just get some insights and some tips to make your job a little easier. Lastly, I will go ahead and promote our upcoming webinar, The Benefits of a 3-Year Plan. That was tip number 2 for us this year. That's going to be hosted again on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. on April 22nd. We'll be putting together that registration page shortly to send as a follow-up, but we would love for you all to go ahead and mark your calendar, share with anyone you feel like could benefit. Again, this is going to be a good one. If you have someone who's maybe challenging a long-term plan, bring them on board for this one, and we'll let them know the impact and how you guys can be better prepared for the coming cliff. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Mary Beth, who has been taking your questions throughout today's webinar, and she's going to go ahead and let us know what some of those questions were.
All right, guys, we've got some good questions in here. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but I believe Scott and Allison will be following up if there's any that we don't get to. So the first one that's in here is related to the focus groups. You mentioned a little bit at the beginning, Scott, in the insights phase, talking to multiple groups and doing intake. How should people determine who to have in those focus groups and how many to have?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And it's often one that you're challenged with, like, well, who do I know I need to speak with? So one of the tips that we wanted to give you guys is look at your campus community as a whole. Look at your various audiences. Who are you really trying to speak with? What are the strategic goals of your institution? And then break it down from there. So in a typical group, you're looking at probably about 8 sessions of intake. We want to make sure that, if possible, you're speaking with those prospective students, but more so you're speaking with prospective families and support networks. So it's not every student, unfortunately, doesn't have a parent as their support network. So extend it beyond that. But we want to understand what are going to be the resources that we need to be promoting to help these audiences make their decisions. You also want to speak to your alumni. What is it about their experiences that have made them so proud? How has that still transitioned to today's students? Speak to your students on campus that are current students. Talk to them about their experiences. What makes them so excited? What makes them want to wear their letters? Or what makes them really want to get up and go to class every morning? Then to that point too, speak to your faculty, speak to your staff. They're a critical component to your campus as well, as is administration. Again, we want to understand, what are we trying to solve here? What are the points that we need to highlight? What's our differentiation? And then beyond that, we want to also make sure that we're talking to our communities and our donors. Our communities are huge parts. Town and gown relationships are going to be very critical for many of you. And we want to make sure that they're empowered through this process as well. Again, when we get that buy-in up front, the results from the end of that are going to be just incredible. And that's why it's important to involve those donors too. Do they want to see the success stories? What is it that's going to motivate them to give? And then how can you incorporate that into your messaging as well? So all that said, look at around 7 to 8 different groups. Start again with the challenges that you are trying to solve for, and then take it down the funnel from there.
Scott, you touched on the buy-in a little bit, which I think relates really well to this next question that came in. Allison, I'll send this one over to you. How do you determine who should be on your core team for a brand project, versus who might need to be in all the milestone and bigger check-in meetings?
Great question. So we have seen a lot of larger campus interaction lately, especially when we're undergoing larger projects such as brand or web or whatnot, because it's a high stakes game, right? There's a lot of things that could go wrong. There's a lot of people that need to have their hands in the mix. And so early on, we are seeing a large group such as the president and the cabinet and everyone that wants to kind of have their hand in the cookie jar, which is great on a much larger scale. So those would be the people that could be included in things like your milestone meetings, maybe your creative concept reviews, or any of those kind of formal settings. However, we would highly recommend that you break that team up to maybe just 1, 2, 3 people that need to really have that day-to-day interaction. You don't necessarily need the president to be involved daily or on every base camp message or making all of the decisions, unless that's just kind of how your institution is ran and that's what they want to do. So I would recommend that your daily interaction could be more on like the director or the VP level, or just depends on how the institution itself is set up.
Great. And then this question, one of everyone's favorites. I know we get this a lot when talking to prospects and new clients, but what does the timeline for something like this look like?
Yeah, so Scott covered that a little bit earlier, but the timeline for brands really can take about 8 to 9 months is what we would recommend to allocate if you're looking at your entire brand strategy development. As he also mentioned, you may want to look at breaking it up into chunks on something that's a little bit of a more manageable scale. So, and that doesn't even include the hardcore research that we mentioned, like something like Marion did, right? So that research could take 2 to 3 months on its own. And then you start to get into your strategy development and the concepts and all of that good stuff. So if you needed to break it up into smaller chunks, I would definitely recommend to look at your insight, strategy, and concept. At least get yourself all the way through that. And then if it's something that you have to maybe allocate or look at your fiscal year, then look at doing maybe your production and your equipping and things of that nature in the next fiscal year if time allows for it. We get asked a lot, well, why can't you just whip this up in about 4 to 5 months? Well, if you want it done right and you want it done the first time, I would definitely recommend planning as far in advance as possible. And again, try to give yourself the 8 to 9 months. If you can do a full year, that would be amazing, but we understand that that's not always the case.
All right. Lots of good questions in here, but in the essence of time, I know we've got to get you guys back to your work from home. I'm going to pass it back to Scott.
All right, so before you leave, we're going to launch a quick poll. We just have 2 quick questions for you. And the reason for these questions, we want to make sure that we understand the topics that you're going to be most interested in learning more about, as well as if we met your expectations for today's session. And if not, we want to make sure we can improve. So if you could, just please take a quick moment to select your responses from this poll. And then once that is done, we will wrap up. And just so you all know, as a follow-up, we have recorded this session. We will send it to you. We will also publish on our website if you would like to share with anyone from your team who wasn't able to attend. We'll share some of those resources we discussed that are going to be great pieces of information during this time. And we'll also give you access to some